Right, we should be live now. Sorry, it took a moment. Prism was having a bit of a moment. I'm just gonna wait until I can see that you guys are in the chat. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me properly. Welcome everyone. We are live from London. We're right in front of Parliament. If any of you are watching the replay in the next few weeks or months or days, we'll be saying hello to everyone in the chat for the next 5 minutes. So if you want to go straight into the walking tour, feel free to skip the next 5 minutes. And welcome, Catherine. And Honey, and Tish, and Sarah. Welcome again, everyone. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Tish. Most of you know the drill already, but I'm going to have to test the microphone. I'm going to tap it 3 times. You tell me whether you've heard the triple tap. Let me know in the chat, because sometimes it can get disconnected, or there could be a bit of dust in any of the connections. Hi, Storybrooke. Good to know. Thank you. And welcome, Julie. And welcome, Cheryl. Welcome, everyone that just joined. We still have a few minutes before to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Did you hear the triple tap? Yes, you did. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Tish. Thank you, Cheryl. So we've got a few minutes to start. We're just waiting for everyone. And welcome, Marty. And welcome, Laila. Let me give you a glimpse of the view already. Hi, Cindy. Nice to see you here. And welcome, Herbie. Welcome, everyone that just joined. We still have a few minutes. We're waiting for everyone to connect. So I'm by the Palace of Westminster. Although it's not really a palace, it's the Parliament. The architecture might look similar from the two buildings, very different period though. This side here, that is the back of Westminster Abbey. That's from the beginning of the 16th century. And this part, that's the Parliament. That's 19th century when they rebuilt it after a fire. Charles Barry. Charles Barry copied the back of the Abbey. It's called Gothic, perpendicular Gothic, and the Parliament is neo-Gothic perpendicular. So it might look like exactly the same architecture, but you've got 3 centuries in between. And welcome, Matthew. Welcome, Pauline. Hello, everyone that just joined. We still have a few minutes before to start. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Let me see how many minutes to be precise. 4 minutes. 4 minutes to go. And let me gracefully stand up to be ready to roll. You saw a weird ad for a living cat sitter. All utilities, 400 a month, 2 hours. Oh, well, that's a good job, Herbie. I'd live on Primrose Hill and I'd take care of a cat. It's a nice place to live. It's right above Camden Town. And welcome, Time Lord. Although this is not the weirdest ad I've ever seen. The weirdest ad I've ever seen, I've actually replied. I used to be registered with an actor agency in China, would you believe? They would fly me over and they never booked me, but because in China they have those, or they did, they might have changed a bit now. They have those actors or fake employees sometimes coming to meetings in a company. And I knew about the job because I met some people in China doing exactly that. And a few years later, I spotted a very strange ad. I don't remember the phrasing, but I was like, I bet that's what it is. And they did take me on their books, but they did tell me it's very, very rare that they want any females. So I never actually got booked, but I was on their books for a while. It's basically to go to company meetings, especially when they're selling the company or whatever, and to make it look a bit more European. They would hire a few Europeans. Then you'd come to the meeting and you'd say anything in English or in French or whatever, just to make it look a bit more international. And then they'll fly you back home. So that was a weird ad. And welcome Natalie, welcome everyone that just joined. We still have about 2 minutes, I think, because it is officially time. Yeah, 2 minutes before it's officially time. It is, to give you an idea, 8:28 p.m. in the UK. And it is still daytime. I think sunset is probably in an hour from now. Or maybe 45 minutes. So probably 1 minute to go now. If anyone was completely new to me, you're very welcome. Do make sure you say hello in the chat. It's always great to see some newcomers. Today we're going towards the royal palaces. And we'll talk about the dark tales on ghosts, on murder mysteries. Hi Gary, a pearly king. And welcome everyone else that just joined. And Diane is here. Welcome Diane from Florida. Nice to see you here, Diane. Ah, I can hear Big Ben. Do you know what that means? Big Ben is telling me it's time to go. It does go at every 15 minutes, so it is 8:30. So without further ado, let's go. I'm gonna flip this camera around and I'll show you why I'm here. We are in front of the Parliament. I don't want to tell you too much about the Parliament today. Although there was a dark tale inside, we had Spencer Perceval, Prime Minister, that was murdered inside in the 19th century. But that's a story for a different day. For now, I want to tell you the story of the guy next to me. I'll show you the front of him. He's got a little friend on his head. Let me show you. It is George V, aka Grandpa England. That's how Queen Elizabeth II called him when she was a little Lilibeth. There you go. So this is George V. Hello. I don't know whether you guys remember what happened to him, but he was, according to me at least, murdered. We spoke about that story before, but I wanted to show you his statue. And he's got a little friend on his skull, a little pigeon up there. Hiya! You didn't hear Big Ben? Sometimes the microphone doesn't catch, well, it's a good microphone if it doesn't catch too much in the background, so then you don't hear much of the traffic noises and everything. But sometimes you might miss Big Ben or you might miss the birds. By the way, you can hear Big Ben, but you cannot see Big Ben. Some of you might be like, yeah, I can see it, it's right there in the middle of the screen. No, this is the Elizabeth Tower. Big Ben is actually the name of the bell inside. But everyone calls the tower Big Ben anyway. Now, we don't care about Parliament today. I want to tell you about George V, the one we've just seen on the statue. But before to tell you about his murder, let me tell you about the man. He was, he's actually remembered as quite a dull king. He was, I don't think he was dull, but he was indeed a family man. I'll wait for the police. It's not for me. I didn't do anything. So yeah, George was a family man, but at the end of the day, that's probably what the country needed at the time, because, you know, as opposed to his father, Edward VII, that was a flamboyant king with a lot of mistresses and all that. George didn't take any mistresses. He was a family man. He liked to collect his stamps and all that. But you know, a lot of the monarchies were crumbling across Europe, and the British one survived. Maybe thanks to a quiet king that would take his role very seriously, and all that. He was not meant to be king. He was actually born the spare. You know, the second sons, we call them the spare. He had an older brother that you would have heard of in some of my tours. That was Prince Eddie, aka Victor Albert. Prince Eddie, we spoke about him in my Jack the Ripper tour. And we also spoke about him when we went down to Soho, when we talked about the Cleveland Street scandal, where he was allegedly caught with a gay brothel. Eddie, we talked about him in my Jack the Ripper tour because he is a very unlikely Jack the Ripper suspect. It's a bit of a ridiculous story, but he is on the long list of suspects. So yeah, Eddie was known for frequenting a lot of sex workers and maybe some male sex workers as well. And he died quite young. He died in an influenza epidemic, and he never ruled. Some people might say it might have been better for the country. Although I'm not convinced he would have been a bad king. It might have been all exaggerated with the local gossip and everything. Welcome, Colin, and welcome everyone that just joined. So, George V became king. He had, of course, many children. One of them being the Queen Elizabeth II's dad, but he was also the spare. The firstborn, the first boy, was the future Edward VIII. That did not rule for very long because of Wallace Simpson, his American divorcee. But George is also very much remembered because he's the one that changed the family name. You know, he's the one that rebranded the royal family to Windsor, because they used to be called Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. And at the beginning of the 18th century, that sounded a little bit too German. People were started to be a bit wary of people from Germany, so that's why he changed the name to his favorite palace, Windsor. Today, if we were to change the name of the royal family, you'd have like endless committees and discussions on talks. At the time, it was just that simple. His favorite palace, and that was it. So this is the entrance of the Abbey when you go for the visit, you know, the touristy visit. I'll show you the main entrance that you see on TV when you see the royal weddings or the coronations and all that. It's on the other side. Now back to George. He caught bronchitis. All those generations of monarchs, they actually died of smoking-related diseases. All of them were big, heavy smokers, and that was also the case with George. He had been very sick before. He had been almost dying before, but this bronchitis at the age of 70 was quite bad, and officially he died. Officially, he asked his physician, "How is the empire, sir?" And the physician replied, "Very well, sir, very well, and soon you'll be well as well. You'd be recovering in Bognor." And the king allegedly said, "Oh, bugger, Bognor," and that would have been his last words. Now we know now that it was definitely not his last words. He probably did say that. When we talk about Bognor, it's Bognor Regis. That's where he used to go and recuperate on the south coast. Some of you might remember I took you there on a live stream before, but the weather was horrendous. I couldn't even, I was flying off with the umbrella and the rain and everything, but we did go down there. Anyway, that was the main story until 1986, when the diaries of his physician, Lord Dawson of Penn, were partially published, and by his own admission in his diary, the physician Bertrand Dawson of Penn poisoned the king. Hi Linda, nice to see you here. he injected the king with a fatal dose of morphia and cocaine. That was quite commonly used at the time. Now, in his diary, he actually kind of gives a couple of different excuses or explanation for that behavior. He said that members of the royal family did not wish to unnecessarily prolong the life of the king. Who would that be? We don't know. Queen Mary? I doubt it. His son Edward VIII? Potentially, because of course he was disagreeing with his dad about marrying Wallace Simpson. Or did anyone actually say so? The other excuse was that he wanted the king's death to be announced in the morning newspapers. They had a better reputation than the afternoon ones. And he had called at 11 p.m. he had called the king's wife to tell the newspaper to wait for midnight for the death of the king, to announce the news in the morning. And of course, the king died just before 12 to be able to be put in the morning newspapers. And that was his excuse. That's it. At the time, legally, it was a bit of a gray area, you know. It wasn't that strict about euthanasia. You might try to call it euthanasia. I would argue that not, because the king was aware of his condition, he was able to speak, and he was not even suffering. And we know from the diaries that his last words were actually, "God damn you," because he saw the physician coming with the syringe. Because the physician actually tried to give the syringe to Nurse Catherine Black for the injection, but she refused to do it. She was very well aware of the consequences. They have a little Jane Austen exhibition here, or at least window thing. Anyway, so yeah, Nurse Black was very well aware that the consequences would be regicide, as simple as it is. So she refused to do it. So that's when the doctor grabbed the syringe and did it himself. And that's when the king went, "God damn you." So the king was not aware, and he was not an accomplice, or he did not agree to any of it. So I would qualify it as murder. Why did Dawson really do that? We don't really know. The explanation is probably quite simple. He might have been a killer or a serial killer. I'll tell you why in a moment. Or simply, he might have just been, because he had been telling people that the king was gonna die, or that the king was on his last leg, and that he'll be soon dead. Then if the king did not die, well, his reputation of a man of science might have been tarnished, So maybe it was in his advantage to kill the king. By the way, before we go much further, this is Westminster College. It's a school for boys. Inside, it's a bit like Harry Potter. You've got those very old traditions on those different houses on different ties, like in Harry Potter. We might speak about the boys of the school again in a few moments. Now back to the death of George V. Lord Dawson of Penn, that's the doctor. That was very unusual that he was the only physician with the king. At the time, the physician, especially when they were on their deathbed, they would have a few doctors present. And there was a little rhyme that was written at the time. We don't know by whom, but it said, "Lord Dawson of Penn killed many men. This is why we sing, God save the king." So clearly, some people did suspect him at the time. Let me cross over. I shouldn't go, but let's go. Before we go much further, see this post box here that is golden. That's the prototype. So this one is not for an athlete in particular, but my regulars, you might know, when you see a golden post box anywhere across the country, it is usually because you have an athlete from the Olympics or the Paralympics that has won a gold medal in that village or in that city or town or wherever the letterbox is. Now back to Dowson of Penn. If you start, obviously they didn't know any of that until 1986. We don't know, by the way, it was not even a big deal in the press when the information came out. We don't know what the Queen thought of it. We don't know whether Queen Elizabeth II was like, oh, poor grandpa was murdered, or, we just don't know. What we do know is that if you start to dig up the other death in the family, if you think he might have been, because I suppose if you are a killer, committing regicide is the most exciting thing ever, because killing a commoner is one thing, but killing a king. And he might not have killed only one king. He might have killed a king and a queen, and a princess. The king's sister, Princess Victoria, she was also unwell at some point, and she got an injection from Lord Dowson of Penn. She died before midnight, right on time for the newspapers in the morning. And Queen Maud of Norway, so she was also the sister of the king. She had married the king of Norway, so she was a queen as well. She was in perfect health when she came down to London to visit, and she fell ill. Dowson convinced her to have a little operation on her. He did. That worked. That was successful at first, but then she became unwell. She had an injection, and she died before midnight. And the doctor had the balls to send a letter to the King of Norway saying, well, I'm ever so sorry she's passed, but at least it was before midnight, so she was in the morning newspapers. And that was so odd. That's such an odd thing to say, but clearly he was a very strange man. Anyway, this is the Westminster Arms. Let me try, I might be kicked out, but I just want to show you a bell. I'll just show you quickly. I don't want to go in, but see, there's a little bell up there. That's called the division bell. That's actually to call the politicians back to Parliament. Because of course, the members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, actually as well, both of them, they used to be called back from the pub to come for a voting session on whatever it might be. So they would pull the rope and actually ring the bell in the pub to call them back. They would have 8 minutes to go back to Parliament to vote. Anyway, to get back to Lord Dowson of Penn, this is a bit far-fetched, but he also, well, there was, you might know, George V had 6 children. We mainly know about 5 because the 6th one was a bit hidden away. At the time, it's extremely sad, but at the time, they were often hiding away their kids that had any disabilities. And the little boy, the little John, he, you might have heard of him because there was a movie, I think it was called The Lost Prince, that told the story of the poor little boy. He suffered from epilepsy and probably autism as well, although it wasn't quite diagnosed at the time. And he was kind of hidden away in Sandringham. And he didn't really we didn't really see him much in public. But he died at the age of, I think, 13 years old, of allegedly an epileptic fit. Now, dying from epilepsy, dying from a fit, it can happen, but it's very rare. Unless your doctor is called Lord Dowson of Penn. Did he have anything to do with it? We don't know. We can only speculate, but once you have a killer taking care of so many people, you can start to question any death, really. Now, we are heading towards one of the most beautiful streets of Westminster. We are on Old Queen Street now, but we're going into Queen Anne Street. By the way, if you fancy yourself a little apartment here, I think this one is number 35 there. Inside this one, you've got an apartment available, 3-bedroom, for 3.5 million. So let me know if you're interested. I'll put in a good word for you. It is. Did you see a candy cane scaffolding? I didn't pay attention. That's a nice way to make the scaffolding look better. Before we go into Queen Anne Street, let me show you the little cockpit stairs down here. We're not gonna go down quite yet, but the staircases, they are meant to be haunted by the ghost of a headless lady wearing a red dress. So this little staircase, it goes down towards Birdcage Walk. We'll go down there in a moment from the other side. So that leads towards St. James's Park. But yeah, it is said to be haunted. I'll tell you all the details in a moment. For now, let's go into one of the most beautiful streets of Westminster. It is Queen Anne's Gate, named after Queen Anne because it was built in, well, most of the buildings on the street would date back to 1704. So that's a very nice example of 18th century architecture. A lot of very famous politicians have lived on the street. Well, very famous at the time. Most of them I don't even know. The only one that I do know, he doesn't have a blue plaque for some reason. Mansfield Cunning, you know, the guy that kind of created the secret services as we know them today. So we can say the MI6, although it wasn't called the MI6 yet. At the beginning of the 20th century, you know, when people started to be a bit wary of Germans, they created the secret intelligence services. Cunning was a guy that had a very interesting personality. He had suffered an accident in France. His son was driving a car, and the son actually died in the crash. And Cunning lost a leg, so he was fitted with a wooden leg. And it is said that when he used to do interviews to recruit some spies, he would. You wouldn't know he was wearing trousers, so you wouldn't see the wooden leg. And in the middle of the interview, he'd grab a knife and he'd suddenly stab his leg. If the person being interviewed did not react too much, they were going to be a good recruit. So yeah, interesting character. He lived I'll show you down there, just before the scaffolding. And before that, let me show you a very interesting lady down here. This is Queen Anne. Queen Anne, for those of you that are my regulars, you would have heard about her in some of my tours. This is the monarch that had 17 pregnancies. No babies that survived, or not long enough to be the heir to the throne. And she's the one that might have had a couple of lesbian relationships, although she was married and everything to a man. So yeah, she probably had an affair with the Duchess of Marlborough, Sarah Churchill. When I say Sarah Churchill, same family as Winston Churchill and Lady Diana. She was an ancestor of both of them. Anyway, we did not know it was a statue of Anne until not until the 1860s, actually, because the statue was a bit old and dirty. Some of the kids actually from Westminster College, they believed it was Queen Mary the First, you know, Catholic Mary. So they used to throw rocks at her and everything, so much so that she had a broken nose. And that's only when they did some refurb in the area, they actually removed the wall. There used to be a wall down here that they noticed that it said Anna Regina. So it was indeed Queen Anne, nothing to do with Queen Mary. Now, Queen Anne Street is very interesting, so because we can talk about a paranormal phenomenon we've never mentioned in my tours before. There used to be a wall right here. You can actually see from the architecture that there's there's some kind of a line here and on the other side. So back in the day when it was developed, there was you had two different streets, Park Street and Queen Street, and a big brick wall in the middle. That's just the way it was, and the wall was destroyed in the 1860s, I think, or maybe 1870s max. Now, I know that, and a few tour guides might know that, but most people have no clue. You know, it looks like a straight street. And let me show you the door cases, because they're quite impressive with the all the woodwork and everything. Now, we have a few stories. In the, well, two of them are in the 1960s. You also have those nice boot scrapers. Two different couples that had been invited here for dinner. And you'd have to remember that here we're talking about quite posh people, you know. Not that posh people don't lie, I mean, of course, but they're not the type of people that would make sensational claims to be viral on TikTok or whatever. There was no TikTok back then, but you know what I mean. Anyway, on two different occasions in the 60s, one couple was invited here to meet their friends. They came out of St. James's Station. So St. James's Station is just around the corner there, the tube station. And they came down the street. The first couple came down. They could not find the address they were looking for. And as they were out of the tube, it was sunny, and suddenly came here, and it was like quite grey and so quiet. You couldn't hear the noise of a single car, nothing. And there was a funny smell. And there was a wall down there. So they went back around the corner and came back through from the other side. And then there was no wall anymore. And they found the address. And everything looked different. So that was one couple. And another one had the same experience. They came from another street. They were invited as well, not even the same building. They came down the street and it looked quiet. You know, usually in London you can hear, even here it's quiet on this street, but you can kind of still hear London life. Maybe you don't on camera because I've got a microphone, but you know, I can hear some vehicles in the distance from here. They couldn't hear anything. And there was a wall. So same, they went around the corner, they came through and then back, and the street was normal. Was it a time slip? Did they go back to a different time for a few seconds? Because it was two of them. You know, if it was, I mean, two different couples, so four people. If it's a single person, you'd think, oh, they've hallucinated. And maybe if it was on a different street, because this one does look quite similar to what it would have looked like 150 years ago. So that was a couple of stories in the 60s, and that's probably not really recorded much. I mean, it would have been mentioned in the press at the time, but that was it. There's another story that has been recorded in a police report. 1995, there's a young lad that escaped from the tube station. I don't know what he had done in the tube. I don't know whether he was a pickpocket or maybe he just jumped over the barriers. Nowadays, you can jump the barriers. The police is not going to chase you. They don't care. There are so many people not paying nowadays. But in the 90s, it might have been different. So he was actually chased by some police officers. He came down here and they were confronted to the wall. The young lad was young and quite flexible, so he jumped over the wall. But the two police officers were a bit older, so they had to go all the way around the corner. And as they went all the way around and came back from the other side, they found their colleagues that had already caught the boy. And their colleagues were like, what stopped you? Where did you go? And the two police officers were like, we couldn't jump over the wall. And the other guys were like, there's no wall. What are you talking about? And they looked at the little thieves or whatever he had done, the little criminal. And they said, oh, how did you get over the wall? And the boy said, I just jumped. I'm flexible, guys. And apparently that's been, I didn't go, I mean, I'm not one to go over the archive and go back to the original sources and stuff, but apparently that was recorded in their police report. So again, we're talking about three different people that had seen a wall in the 1990s. So the wall had been destroyed for over 100 years. How do you explain that? I have no idea. Because one person hallucinating, that's fine, you know, they might have smoked or whatever, but three, and actually 7 in total, you know. So that's an interesting example of time slips. It's It's an interesting phenomenon because every time the ones that are reported, at least, it's always two people at least. I suppose when it's only one person, you don't even bother to report it. You're just like, oh, I've hallucinated and that's it. Anyway, we are now on Birdcage Walk. So straight ahead, it is St. James's Park. We'll go through that in a bit. But Birdcage Walk, that's because there used to be a collection of birds down here. At the time, soldiers were they were almost fainting at the sighting of the ghost, and it was partially debunked at some point. Some people claimed that those boys from Westminster College had bought what they called the phantasmagoria. A phantasmagoria was a machine created by the French. It's, imagine like a projector. It was actually a lantern, some kind of a lantern with stencil or some lantern that I've lost you for a sec. I don't know what you've heard, so I'll just go back into the story because I've lost you for a sec. I was saying that the original Guards chapel was bombed in 1944 and 121 people, the majority of them being soldiers, died. So in the 50s, you had no chapel here. It has been rebuilt in the 60s as a little memorial to the Guards that died. But in the 50s, you had nothing. Yet we've got a few Guards that said that they went in the chapel in the 19th. I wait until the signal is back. Right, I don't know how much you've missed, so I'll just tell you again. There are some soldiers that allegedly went into the chapel in the 1950s. When the chapel wasn't there, it had been bombed out. It was only rebuilt in the 60s. And they allegedly went in and spotted a lot of soldiers praying, and then they walked out and the chapel was gone. So is it again a time slip? Who knows? And if it is a time slip, why here? Is there some kind of just showing you the corgi here. Is there some kind of line, or, you know, if indeed we live in different dimensions with different frequencies for different periods of time, or why is it right on the same line with Queen Anne Street, where we had a few time slip as well? Is there some kind of physical explanation we don't understand quite yet? I don't know. And am I back? Yeah, because Walpuri says lost huge building. Apologies, I see the signal has dropped again. I was just telling you that the building here, that's the Wellington Barracks. And to get back to the ghost of the headless lady, there have been many sightings in the 19th century. Always the same, a headless lady here, or sometimes in the park, wearing a red dress. Now, in 1972, there was a motorist driving here that went straight into a lamppost. So he was going to be charged for careless driving. But would you believe at the magistrate court, his lawyer, or I'm guessing it's his lawyer, they came up with the story of the ghost. He claimed he had seen a lady, a headless lady, and he tried to avoid her. That's why he went into the lamppost. Would you believe he was actually acquitted? So that worked, because the case of the headless lady was very well documented. They actually acquitted him. Now, there have been some gossip that the ghost of the headless lady might have been a lady that was murdered by her boyfriend, that was her husband, that was a guard in the Coldstream Guard. Maybe. There's no evidence of such a murder. It is claimed to be in the late 18th century. We don't know anything about that murder. What we do know is that there was a murder the other way around. There was a Coldstream Guard. So you might know the guards, the King's Guard. We've got, for the ones with the bearskin hats and the red tunics, we've got 5 different regiments. The Irish, the Scots, the Welsh, the Coldstream, and the Grenadiers. So the Coldstream and the Grenadiers, they are the English. And nowadays the guards, they are in front of the palaces, they are not in front of the barracks, but at the time you also had a couple of guards standing in front of the barracks. And one of them was Henry Ducker. He was a young man that was quite sexy. And you know, at the time, you did have some kind of ladies that would hire a soldier, or they'll date a soldier, but sometimes they'd pay for their services. Today we'd call that a gigolo, really. And Henry was one of those. And he had this girlfriend, Annette Meyers. Well, girlfriend or customer, you might call it however you want. She was in love with him. I mean, she believed they were having a relationship, but she would pay for stuff for him. She would give him some money, and she couldn't afford to pay very much because she was a servant. She was not aristocracy or anything. And apparently one day, Henry suggested that she should sell her body to make some money to give to him. And also she found out that Henry was seeing another lady that did exactly that. She was supplying her income by sex work. She became very jealous. She went up to Regent Street, where she tried to buy a gun at a gun seller on Regent Street. She said to the gun seller that it was to shoot a wild dog that would stand in her garden and destroy the vegetables. And the guy at the shop, he was like, "Oh, but I can just come over and kill the brute for you." She said, No, don't bother. I live all the way in Hackney. Just sell me the gun." So she bought a gun. She came down here where I am now in front of the barracks, and she shot Henry Ducker in the head, in the back of the head. He died. And she stood there. She did not run away or anything. She was arrested by the police. She did not claim to be innocent or anything. She assumed all the responsibility for her actions. And she was actually spared the gallows because the public opinion at the time was quite, they had some sympathy for her. And she was actually transported to Tasmania. And then she had a normal life in Melbourne. She married and had some kids. She died in Melbourne many, many years later. But now, talking about tragedies, let me show you the site of another one that's very little known. So we are now in St. James's Park. St. James's Park, that used to be a hunting ground at the time of King Henry VIII. St. James's Park, Green Park, Hyde Park, that was all the same hunting ground. Under James I, it became a bit of a menagerie. He had camels and crocodiles, like a zoo. Under Charles II, the Merry Monarch, it became a bit of a red light district with male and female ladies of the night. If you wanted to read a dirty poem, there's a poem from the 17th century by John Wilmot, the Duke of Rochester. It's called A Ramble Through St. James's Park. It is the dirtiest poem I've ever read. They use the B word, the D word, the F word. It's all about what was happening in the park at night. Anyway, today is no longer the case. Today it's very family friendly, usually. At night, well, you see it's open at night, so you can have a few strange people at night and sadly some homeless people using the benches as well. It's one of the only parks that are full thing you've heard. I was just saying that the little island, just there, it's called West Island. The lake is artificial, but back in the day, there used to be a canal that was dug up at the time of Charles II, and there was a little pond on this side as well. But yeah, just down there, there's a little island. No one really goes in there apart from the pelicans and maybe the geese and the squirrels. Well, although the squirrels, they don't really swim, so I don't know how they would get there. Maybe on a floating piece of wood. But anyway, it's used for wildlife. And at the time, it was only inspected every 2 years. Now, from 2008, oh, there's a heron just here. Hey, mate, come and say hello. From 2008 to 2009, there were a lot of sightings. You know, this, if you came at daytime, this park is busy. 5 million people a year come and visit the park because, of course, you come to see the changing of the guards, so you come down the park. I'm here every day. I mean, not every day, but well, from next week I'll be here every single day for 3 months. This is like my office, really. And I say from next week because next Thursday I run a lot of tours where I take people for a royal walk and then I take them into the palace. I don't actually guide into the palace, but I take them in. Anyway, this place is a busy place, and there have been a few reports of a silhouette that had been spotted on the island. People did not know whether it was a man or a ghost, but people had spotted something. So I can repeat what we might have missed. So I was telling you there were a few sightings on the island. In 2008, 2009, but that was it. And 3 years later, there's a tree surgeon that went on the island to inspect the trees. And he found a skeleton. A man had died on the island alone. It's quite astonishing to think that, you know, being so close to so many people, this is such a busy area, and no one noticed, no one smelled anything. The body was quickly identified because he had the passport with him. Next to him was a bottle of vodka on an American passport. He was a 69 years old that believed they are in a relationship with a celebrity or anyone really. Guys, if you can hear me, let me know in the chat what is the last detail you've heard. Just to, because I don't know how much detail you've heard. Because I don't know how much you've missed, I can easily go back into the story. Let me know, this way I can repeat what you've missed. I was telling you that a body was found on the island, a skeleton. The doctors believed he had been killed he had died 3 years earlier. It was the body of a guy called Robert James Moore. He had been very easily identified because, okay, you can hear me, but the picture is buffering. Perfect. Okay, that's better than the other way around. So yeah, his passport was there, and a bottle of vodka. He was a weirdo. He had been sending a lot of letters to the Queen for 15 years. Some of those letters were 600 pages long, would you believe? He had also sent the Queen some kind of obscene pictures, and he had come to London, and he somehow took camp on the little island, probably for a better way to stalk the Queen. It's astonishing to imagine that he could have been dead for 3 years, no one realizing. We were talking about the different guards earlier: Grenadier, Scots, Welsh, Irish, Coldstream. The only way you can tell the difference is the little plum on the bearskin hat. If any, the Scots have no plum. You can also count the buttons on the red tunics. The Welsh, for example, it's 5x5, or it could be 2x2. Anyway, that's that poor gentleman. That's quite sad, and we don't know exactly when he died. So we don't know whether the sightings were the man when he was alive, or if it was the ghost when he was already dead. Let's cross. I probably shouldn't cross, but let's go. Now here we are. This is Buckingham Palace. The palace itself, what you see in the middle, that's the newest part. The original Buckingham house that was built for the Duke of Buckingham. That's the let's get a bit closer. That's the part to the side down there. That's the orange stone. That's part of Buckingham House. Anyway, let's go and take a quick look at Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, she's the one on the monument straight ahead. Victoria, she's really the one that made Buckingham Palace what it is today. She's the one that really moved in, because before that, Buckingham House was bought by George III as a spot to have a place to have a few spare rooms, really. But the main place of court in London was St. James's. We'll go and take a look at St. James's in a moment. And Victoria, when she lived here, she also had a stalker, would you believe? Because we were just talking about a stalker from Queen Elizabeth II, but Victoria also had a stalker, a boy known as Boy Jack. He was 14 years of age, and he was very much into the young queen. And the queen, bless her, she did not want to make a big fuss out of it, because the boy kept sneaking into the palace, and the queen, she would treat him like a normal criminal. So he'd be sent to prison. He'd to prison for a few weeks, then he'd be released, and then he'd come back. Eventually, one day, the queen did have enough, because the boy got caught inside again. And thank you, Diane, for the tip. That's very much appreciated. And the boy got caught inside again, and something looked a bit bulky with his couch area, you know, his trousers between his legs. Not what you'd think. So they were like, okay, you strip down. He had stolen some of Queen Victoria's underwear. She had enough this time. She sent him to Australia so he wouldn't come back. Now, I don't know if you can see the flag very well from here, but this is the British flag, you know, the Union flag, that signifies that the king is not here today. I know it might be a bit confusing. You might have read some old guidebook that would tell you when the flag is there, the queen is there. When there's no flag, there's no queen. Yes. Until 1997, it was indeed that straightforward. When the queen was here, her flag was up. Not the British flag, but the royal standard. The royal standard, that's the flag you would have seen on the coffin if you've seen the funerals on TV. The Queen's funeral, I mean. And when she was away, no flag. Simple, easy. And you might remember exactly what happened in 1997. Lady Diana passed away. Her body was kept at the chapel at St. James's for a few days. Tons and tons of flowers were deposited there against the railings. Thousands of people came to pay their last respect to Lady Diana, and they could not understand why there was no flag. They expected a flag at half-mast. That's what we usually do for a royal death. There was no flag because the protocol is the protocol. The Queen was in Balmoral. So Tony Blair, the Prime Minister at the time, he had to tell the Queen, Your Majesty, you are gonna lose popularity here. We have to find a solution. And the solution came with the British flag. They put the Union flag instead of the royal standard, so there could be a flag at half-mast for Lady Diana. And after that, we kept the system in place. Thank you very much, Christopher. That's very, very much appreciated. It is really thanks to your generosity that I can keep going on all that. Now, yeah, they kept the system in place, so nowadays there's always a flag. You need to check which flag to know if the monarch is here or not. And now it's even more complicated because the king doesn't live in Buckingham Palace, he lives at Clarence House. That's where we're heading to next. So even when the king is here in residence, you never know exactly in which building the king is. It is probably much better for security reasons because we've had a few intruders. We were talking about Queen Victoria's stalker, but we have had many more. Yeah, we had the guy dressed up as Batman on the balcony once. So this is the famous balcony there. That's where they put the red carpet and they come and wave. When Queen Elizabeth II used to wave, some journalist called it changing the lamp bulb. Because she went like this, didn't she? So changing the lamp bulb. And the intruders, we also had a guy, a naked guy on the roof. He paraglided himself and he landed on the roof. And we had 3 campers from Germany. They climbed over the fence and they pinched up their tent in the garden, would you believe? They slept in the tent. They were woken up in the morning by the guards. The guards were like, do you know where you are? They were like, yeah, Hyde Park. We still don't know whether it was a genuine mistake or not. And the most famous intruder, I'm not going to tell you the story today because you probably know the story, but it is Michael Fagan. It is a gentleman a guy in 1982 that ended up on the Queen's bed. If you don't know the story, maybe we can do another tour another day about that. Thanks, Linda. By the way, this is the BBC crescent, or BBC or journalists in general. When there's a royal event, they close all this crescent here. You have all the journalists coming with their cameras, and they go, "We are live from Buckingham Palace, blah blah blah, blah blah blah." Now, you probably know a lot of what I'm telling you about the palace. What you might not know, it's that Buckingham Palace is also haunted. They have two ghosts. The first one is the ghost of a monk. He's dressed in yes, indeed, the security. You know what? Every year I get a lot of gifts at the palace. So when I do those tours at the palace, so I do a walking tour first, and then I take people in, but I'm not going in, I'm leaving them there. And a lot of people, well, you know, sometimes I would tell people as a joke, I'm like, oh, by the way, as you get into the palace, it's gonna be airport type security. So if you have any guns or any drugs, give them to me now. Or any knives, because a lot of people don't realize that it is illegal in the UK to carry a knife that is more than 4 inches long. And sometimes people from America, they're like, okay, I cannot take a gun here, so I'll take a knife. And you would be surprised by the amount of knife we get. And I'm not even taking them myself because I don't want to be carrying a knife. So I actually tell them to hide them somewhere, which is ridiculous, but because they cannot take them into the palace and then I don't see them again. Last summer I had a bottle of, well, I did the same. I was like, guys, if you have any ketamine, no, I shouldn't say that because YouTube doesn't want drugs, but anyway, guys, if you have any anything you shouldn't have in your bags, give it to me now. And I got a bottle of whiskey. The guy was, and it was a tour at 9 a.m. The guy was like, uh-oh. So he gave me a bottle of whiskey because he couldn't take it inside. So yeah, the security is quite strict for the visitors. Not for everyone. You know, the police officers that work in front of the palace, they're called personal protection officers. They're protecting the members of the royal family. Although they're part of the police, they have quite a tight non-disclosure contract with the royal family. One of them has started to talk about his time in the 90s when he was protecting Prince Andrew, because he's moved to Australia. He doesn't really care anymore. It's a very interesting, a few very interesting interviews to listen to. He says that pretty much every night, because Andrew, shouldn't call him Prince anymore, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor used to live in Buckingham Palace, and every night a lot of young girls would come, and usually they have to check their IDs and lock them in and stuff. The girls visiting Andrew, they wouldn't. They would just bypass security. So that was actually putting the Queen at risk, you know. And very often in the afternoon, those police officers were in the back gardens picking up the golf balls for Andrew. The working like as a caddy on a golf course. This is not what we pay armed police officers for. So yeah, you might not be able to take a bottle of whiskey inside, but some people do whatever they want. Anyway, back to the ghost. The monk, we don't know where he's coming from. He only appears on Christmas Day for one reason or another. The poem, Matthew, it's called A Ramble Through St. James's Park by John Wilmot, the Duke of Rochester. A Ramble Through St. James's Park. Yeah, so the monk, we don't know. Well, the thing is, you know, there used to be a hospital, a leprosy hospital at the site of St. James's. And at the time it was staffed by monks. Then it was nuns. So there might have been a naughty monk, because the ghost is apparently chained. We don't know why. But you know, at the time the church, they kind of had their own justice system. Sometimes they would, you had the secular justice and the justice of the men. So he might have been locked up at some point and died in a cell somewhere. We don't know. The other ghost at the palace, it's not actually a ghost as such. It is actually a ghostly noise. At the beginning of the 19th century, there was a guy that worked as a secretary for Edward VII. He had been I was going to say the victim. He had been the subject of a very, very scandalous divorce. Well, at the time, pretty much any divorce was scandalous. His name was Major John McGuinn. He couldn't deal with his reputation being tarnished by the divorce, and one night he took a gun and he shot himself in the palace on the first floor. And it is said that every so often at night you hear gunshots in the palace. So that's like a ghostly noise. Now, we are now in front of Clarence House. Let me pan the camera around to show you. The white building behind the tree branch there, that is Clarence House. That's where the king actually lives when he's in London. He much prefers to be at Highgrove, but when he's in London, so that's mainly on a Wednesday, that's where he sleeps. And it's not that glamorous inside. Well, I've not seen much of the inside. It's some of the police officers that work here that they've told me. We did see a bit of the inside a couple of months ago when, you know, Gisèle Pellicot, the French major, I don't want to say the R word, but, you know, the sexual victim in France, she was invited by Queen Camilla to come into Clarence House. So we saw a few clips of the inside of Clarence House. And the other building on the other side, the yellow one there, excuse my finger, but this one there, that is Lancaster House. And Lancaster House, I bet most of you have seen the inside. You might not know that you have, but you have. If you've watched The Crown, or The King's Speech, or the new Bridgerton, Queen Charlotte, pretty much any movies or TV series that are meant to be set in Buckingham Palace, it's actually filmed in Lancaster House. And the corridors look very similar. So what they do is they rent a few paintings from the palace, they pop them in there, and then no one knows any better. The original Buckingham House actually was built with the same stone. It is the facade we saw just earlier that was built later on. Now, Clarence House, the white one, that one there, guess what? It is haunted. The ghost story here at Clarence House started through the Second World War. What happened is, it used to be the Queen Mother that lived in there, you know, the Queen Mother that died in 2002. Through the Second World War, though, they landed the building to, sorry, I've got some kind of a fly that flies through my mouth. The building was borrowed by the Red Cross, the international part of the Red Cross. They dealt with the prisoners of war abroad. And there was a young clerk called Sonia Mash that worked inside, and she had to work on a Saturday afternoon, and she was alone in the building, and she did not feel comfortable. She felt like someone or something was staring at her the full afternoon, and she was going a bit mad, but she had to stay at work, you know. And eventually she saw is that my foxy friend? Majesty! Look, it's Majesty. Let's give him some peanuts. Majesty, I've got peanuts. Come. Oh, it's a baby. It's not Majesty, it's a baby. Oh, he's hurt. Let me give him some peanuts. Hey, mate. Hey, mate. That's for you. Yeah. What happened to you? You hurt. You don't want it? Oh. He's injured. Usually they like peanuts. Oh. I used to have my favorite fox that lived here. His name was Majesty, because he lived at Clarence House. But this is not Majesty. This is a baby. Careful, baby boy. Oh, he can run. He's hurt, but he can run. Oh. We should get him some help. Oh, he didn't want my peanut. He's left it behind. Usually they like my peanuts. It's still there. I usually keep it for the squirrels, but usually they eat peanuts. Although those peanuts, they don't smell the best. They're from Morrison's, but even some of the squirrels don't like those ones. Maybe I got a bad bad bunch of peanuts from Morrison's. Unacceptable. Even the animals don't want them.
Oh, that'd be great, yeah.
Now, back to the foxes. No, back to the ghost. Well, I wouldn't mind more foxes, but back to the ghost. Little Sonia Mash, she spotted this triangular shape walking right towards her, and she was like, that's it. She grabbed her coat and ran away. Well, she closed the curtain before because, you know, it was in the middle of the what do you call it? The Black Nights, you know, the blackout in the middle of the war. So she closed the curtains and ran off. And the next Monday she had to go back to work, and she told her colleagues exactly what happened. She said she'd seen a ghost in Clarence's house, and one of the staff said, "Oh, that's probably the Duke of Cornwall." We don't know why. The Duke of Cornwall did live inside. He was the last surviving son of Queen Victoria. And he died peacefully. He died at the age, I think, of 91 or 92. He died in of old age in 1942. So we don't know why he would be haunting the building. But clearly that wasn't the first case because the staff knew exactly what ghost she was talking about. Now, sometimes I think we're quite quick to assume whose ghost it is. You know, it could be anybody. If it's just a grey shape, how do you know it's the Duke of Cornwall? Now, let's go and see another palace. Let's go and see St. James's. St. James's Palace, I know it's not as famous as Buckingham Palace, but really it is as important, if not more important than Buckingham Palace. St. James's Palace, it is a Tudor building. It dates back to King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII, I'm sure you know the full story. That's the king with the 6 wives. To tell you only the beginning of the story, to tell you how the palace came in the picture, Henry was first married to a Spanish princess, Catherine of Aragon, but she failed to give him a boy. At the time, boys were much more important, and Henry blamed his wife. They didn't quite know how it worked, you know, in terms of chromosomes at the time, so Henry wanted a new wife. You couldn't get a divorce back then unless the Pope found a good excuse. So Henry asked the Pope said no. So Henry was like, stuff it then, I'll break up with the Pope. So that's how he broke up with the Catholic Church to create his own church, the Church of England. So he gave himself the title of the head of the church. Still today, the king is the head of the Church of England. And that allowed him to grant himself an annulment, so some kind of a divorce. And then he could remarry his favorite mistress, Anne Boleyn. For Anne, he commissioned this beautiful building, St. James's Palace. Well, that's what most tour guides would tell you. Some historians don't agree. Some historians say that it was built for himself as a hunting lodge, and then for his future son that he never, that he had, but that he didn't have yet. Anyhow, poor Anne never saw the palace fully finished because he chopped her head off. She was a bit shortened at the Tower of London, so she never saw the palace finished. Now, there are 2 different ghosts inside of the palace. And, oh, you've messaged, oh, amazing singing Cheryl. Oh, I hope they can help him. Oh, thanks for doing that. Thanks. It was so cute. I hope they can help. Although I don't know if they'll find him. Because once I was stood by a fox that was clearly injured for like an hour, and we called, was it the RSPCA or one company, and they were like, okay, we're coming. I stood by the fox for an hour. He looked very unwell, like he wasn't gonna go anywhere. And just when it was the time when they would turn up, he actually stood up and left. He was quite slow. I mean, he was not. Then I was like, what can I do? I'm not gonna grab it. So the poor, I don't know if they ever found the poor animal. Anyway, thanks for doing that. Now, they have 2 ghosts. We have the ghost, There's one ghost that was seen quite a few times. I'll tell you later on about him. But there's another very interesting story with a ghostly prediction. What happened is that in the late 17th century, there were a couple of ladies that were given apartments inside of the palace. One was called Hortense Mancini. She was the niece of Cardinal Mazarin, the French guy. Cardinal Mazarin is quite infamous. I think it's mainly because he was linked to the Three Musketeers. Well, in the first cardinal was Cardinal Richelieu in the Three Musketeers, but after that it was Mazarin. Anyway, she was the Duchess of Mazarin. She was a former mistress of Charles II. Well, one of the many former mistresses. And you know, at the time when the king would get tired of one of their mistresses, often they would still take care of them financially, at least. So they would find themselves younger girls, but then they would still take care of the old ones by giving them apartments somewhere. So you had the Duchess of Mazarin that lived inside in an apartment, and she became a very good friend with another lady. We don't know as much about her. It is Madame de Beauclerc. She was a former mistress of James II. So this is still part of St. James's down here. There's a bit of scaffolding, so you don't see much of the main gate. But so those two ladies became very good friends. So the Duchess of Mazarin and Madame de Beauclerc, they would play cards and they'll chat inside of the palace for hours and hours, and they used to chat about the afterlife. They used to wonder about what happened when one dies, and is it any easy to come back and make contact with the living, and what happens to the soul. And they promised one another that if they did die first, they would give the other one a sign, if indeed it is possible. And you've got one of those old boot scrapper here. If you come down from your horse in the muddy streets, you can come and clean your shoes. And 1699, Hortense, the Duchess of Mazarin, fell ill, and she died. Now, Madame de Beauclerc was waiting for a sign for weeks, months, years, and she ended up being very disappointed. After that, she said, you know what, now I know the truth. When I die. There's nothing else. And one day, her mate, so she had another lady friend that lived in a mansion somewhere else, received a note, a little note that read, "Come and see me today if you want to see me alive." So the friend actually rejected the offer because, she rejected the offer because she was a bit unwell herself. So she thought, okay, if my friend is dying, I don't want to come with they didn't know about bacteria at the time, but they kind of understood the idea of sick people contaminating others. So she was like, no, I can't come, I'm sick myself. And a couple of hours later, she received another note from Madame de Beauclerc. There was a package with a little box full of jewelry, and she insisted, she was like, my dear friend, if you want to see me alive, come to see me today at St. James's Palace. And then eventually you were protesting today, Cosmonk. Oh, interesting. Eventually the friend decided to come. So she came to see Madame de Beauclerc here at St. James's, and she was really surprised. Madame de Beauclerc was in perfect health. She expected to find her friend on her deathbed, and Beauclerc was like, no, I'm fine for now, but I'll be dead tonight. I saw my friend this morning. Finally, the Duchess of Mazarin made an apparition. She came into the living room. Apparently, she looked perfectly normal, like when she was alive, but she didn't really have any feet. She was kind of like floating around. And apparently, the Duchess of Mazarin told her friend Beauclerc, you'll be with me tonight, between the hour of 12 midnight and 1. That was it. And then Madame de Beauclerc was like, oh, hold on, tell me more. Tell me what it's like on the other side. Tell me what we do, what we see, how is it? But Mazarin had already vanished into thin air. So that's why Beauclerc was convinced she was gonna die. And after midnight, she's standing there, and suddenly she went, I'm sick at heart. And she fainted. She never recovered. She died. Exactly as her friend had said, between midnight and 1 a.m. So that was a ghostly premonition for someone that was very healthy. So a very interesting story, really. So that's one of the ghosts. There's another ghost that is the ghost of a young man from the beginning of the 19th century. His name was Joseph Celis. He was a Sardinian, so Italian valet. He worked for the Duke of Cumberland. But before I tell you the story, let me show you a little plaque here. We talked earlier about the murder of George V at the very beginning of the tour, if you remember. This is his wife, Queen Mary. She was a very good consort. She was first meant to marry his brother, Victor Albert, but then she married him. And you know, usually when you have a good king, you have a good consort behind them as well. And Mary lived here at Marlborough House. We don't see much of Marlborough House, but behind the wall there, that's Marlborough House. That's the building that was commissioned by Queen Anne for her mistress, the Duchess of Marlborough. If you've seen the movie The Favourites with Olivia Colman, that's the story of Sarah Churchill and the Marlborough House and everything. Anyway, back to the ghost at St. James's. There was a little murder mystery in St. James's Palace in 1810. What happened is that the Duke of Cumberland was one of the many children of George III. We are in 1810, so George III is suffering from mental health issues. They were about to name George IV as regent, so that would have been the brother of the Duke of Cumberland, Ernest Augustus. Let me show you his pictures. He looks surprisingly like a young Boris Johnson. So that's a young Ernest Augustus, and that's the old one on the other side. Oh, thank you, Matthew. That's very much appreciated. So Ernest Augustus is the son of the king and the brother of the future king. He lived in the palace. He had a terrible reputation. Look, they're doing some filming again. All those are actors' green room. You know, this is Hollywood stuff, you know, or movie productions in general. We don't know where they're filming. It could be in Lancaster House, or it could be in any of the gentlemen's club on the other side. Next to the Royal Society, there's another gentleman club. Often they run them for movies and stuff. I don't know what they're filming. I saw the crew this morning, but there's no point asking because most of the time they don't have the right to tell you. They tell you a code name because they don't want everyone to know what's being filmed. Right. So, the Duke of Cumberland, he lived in the palace. One night he went for dinner with the king, then he went to the opera, then he came home, he put himself into bed, allegedly. There was, some of the servants had heard some shouting, but they knew better, they knew they shouldn't intervene. The Duke had a bad reputation, he was hated, he was quite obnoxious, and he was suspected of a lot of horrible stuff. He was even accused of having an incestuous affair with his little sister Sophia. Probably very untrue, but Sophia did have an illegitimate pregnancy. Anyway, he was a guy that was not very much liked. And he put himself into bed. And about 2 a.m. he allegedly woke up because of a big blow on his head, like a baseball bat, or more likely, the flat side of an axe. He stood up, he faced his attacker. The attacker allegedly cut a bit of his leg, a tiny cut, not very deep, and ran into the corridors. Now the Duke screamed, Neil, Neil, I am murdered. Very dramatic. Neil was the valet. He had two valets, Cornelius Neil and Joseph Celis. So Neil, of course, ran to assist the Duke. Then the Duke killed a bit of time, and then eventually they were like, okay, let's go and wake up Celis, the other valet, to let him know that there was an attacker in the building. When they got to Celis's bedroom, he was on his bed in a pool of blood. He had been brutally attacked. There was an inquest, a very quick one. They very quickly concluded that Celis, the valet, had tried to kill the Duke, and he did not manage. Then he would have realized he was in big trouble, and he would have run to his bed chambers and taken his own life. That was the official version. It's quite unlikely, but you know, that's what they said at the time. And some people believed it was the other way around. Some people believed it might have been the Duke that killed his valet and then faked an attack on himself. That would make much more sense. But, you know, people accused him at the time, but they went down for libel. Now, before we go much further, you've got two statues here. We can actually go a bit closer, actually, so you can see them better. The first one, this is the Queen Mother. So that's Queen Elizabeth, that's it. Queen Elizabeth, she doesn't have a number because she's a queen consort. Like today, Queen Camilla. It's perfectly fine for me to say Queen Camilla, but never would I say Queen Camilla the First, because she's not a queen in her own right, she's a queen consort. And this is George VI. So that's Queen Elizabeth II's dad. He's the son of George V, the one we were talking about being murdered earlier. So Queen Elizabeth was the Queen Mother. The queens, you can have a few queens at the very same time. Actually, in 1952, we had three for the time being. Queen Elizabeth II had just accessed the throne as the ruling monarch, you know, the one that really matters. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was very much still alive. You might have been able to read the date. She died at nearly 102 years of age. And Queen Mary, the one we just saw on the plaque, was also still alive for a few months. So technically, we had three queens. And that could happen again. I mean, I hope not, you know, but, you know, the king has cancer. If the king was to die tomorrow, next in line is, of course, William. So we should have King William V and Queen Catherine. But what about Camilla? Well, we don't strip the titles away, so Camilla should remain a queen. She should become a dowager queen. The Queen Mother was also the dowager, but she hated the term. She thought it was way too Victorian and outdated. She preferred to be called the Queen Mother. But Camilla, she's not the mother, is she? So in theory, she should become a dowager queen. That'll be interesting to see what happens and how we refer to her, but yeah. Although Camilla's health apparently is not that good either. She was also a heavy smoker for many years. She often has some lung issues. Anyway, back to the murder. So yeah, people accused the Duke already at the time, but they went down for libel. You know, at the time, you did not accuse the brother of the king. Well, nowadays, when you accuse the brother of the king, they just give 12 million pounds on to people they've never met before. Anyway, so at the time, you didn't accuse the brother of the king. So although he was the brother of the regent, not quite the king yet, they went down for libel. But the doubt really persisted for many years. And actually 20 years later, he had another valet. Guess how he died? Same, suicide. Although one might argue that the second valet might have been really the case. Now, yes, Ronnie, she was a very popular lady, the Queen Mother, although now there are a lot of new content on the internet that claim that she really wasn't as nice as she appeared to be. And I did get sucked into those kind of videos, and I read all the comments, and sometimes, you know, sometimes in the comments people are compulsive liars anyway, but even in the comments a lot of people said, yeah, my dad worked with her, or my uncle worked for her, and apparently, yeah, there's a lot of people that claim she really wasn't that nice of a lady. Anyway, I don't know, I've not met her, she probably was lovely. Now, back to the murder. The thing is, if it was the Duke that killed his valet, which is probably what it is, because the body, I mean, the body was posed as a suicide, but it didn't make sense. The razor was a bit too far, the arms were way too straight, and he had cut through his thigh. Why would he go through the cravat thing? He could just remove the thing and cut his throat, you know. And it's actually very hard to cut your throat that deep anyway. So people have speculated all along that it was the other way around. We don't know why though. Some say that it might have been that Celis, the Italian valet, the murder victim, had actually spotted the Duke and the other valet, Neil, in a very compromising position sexually. It is claimed that the two of them had an affair, and one of the slippers of Celis was found in the closet, like if he had been hiding in there waiting to kill the Duke, but he could have actually been hiding in there waiting to see the Duke on the valet having a sexual relationship. That was actually a crime. That could have been, you could have been hanged for that at the time, or they could have just put his slippers in there to make it look like he was hiding in there. We just don't know. Talking about dukes, this is one of the other sons of George III. This is Frederick, the Grand Old Duke of York, up there on the column. Now, the Grand Old Duke of York, you don't need to do much to be the Duke of York. All you need to do is to be the second son of the monarch. So the Duke of York today, well, until September, that was still Prince Andrew. This is not a statue of Andrew, of course. That was the Duke of York at the beginning of the 19th century. And that's the one you might know because of the little nursery rhyme. Oh, the Grand Old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He marched them down to the top of the hill and marched them down again. When they were up, they were up. When they were down, they were down. When they were only halfway up, they were neither up nor down. So that's I've got absolutely no rhythm, but those are the lyrics. And some of the modern journalists, they've come up with a new little rhyme for our present / former Duke of York, Andrew. It goes, oh, the Grand Old Duke of York, he had 12 million quid. He gave them to someone he never met for something he never did. I think I prefer this one. Anyway, let's get back to our murder. It could indeed have been Celis that witnessed an abomination, as they would have said at the time, and tried to blackmail the Duke, and then they might have killed him. So it might have been the Duke plus, it's very probably the Duke plus the other valet, Neil, that did it together. Or it could be Neil alone, but that wouldn't make sense. He doesn't really have a motive, although the two valets detested each other. Or it could actually be that the two of the valets had an affair with the Duke, and maybe there was jealousy between the both of them. Who knows? We'll probably never know the motive, but it does look like the Duke was guilty. And the Duke, would you believe, he became king. Not here, because Victoria was next in line, but he became king of Hanover, Germany. You know, we said that the royal family, they are originally from Germany. It is true. We had Queen Anne, the one we saw on the statue at the beginning of the tour. She had 17 pregnancies, but no babies that survived. So we didn't have an heir to the throne. So they went to fetch some cousins in Germany. So George I, George II, George the III, they were actually kings of the both kingdoms at the very same time. But in Hanover, they couldn't have a lady on the throne. It had to be a male heir. So that's why he became king of Hanover. Victoria became queen here, and that's how the two kingdoms split. Well, Hanover didn't survive very long, because after that you had the reunification of Germany. Not the reunification, the unification, because they never been united before. Now, this is the Admiralty Arch. They've just removed the scaffolding very recently. It's slowly being converted into a hotel. It's going to be the Rubens. Do you care to guess how much? So the best suite, the royal suite, my understanding is that they'll have a view on Buckingham Palace on one side and a view on Trafalgar Square on the other side. How much do you think you'd pay for a night in the royal suite? Let me know in the chat. It's not the most expensive in London. I think the most expensive is the one in Hyde Park. What is it called? Mandarin? Yeah. So how much would you pay for this one, do you think, for one night for the royal suite? Thank you, sorry about that. In British pounds. Well, you can tell me in dollars and we'll try to convert. Ooh, it's a bit more, Sylvie. It's a bit more, Pauline. Well, much more. I don't even know who spends that much money in a hotel, because really, when you're traveling, you don't spend much time in the hotel, do you? Tish, you can double that. Laurie, it's a bit less. I think the Mandarin Hotel, the one on Hyde Park Corner, that's about 30k, but this one is gonna be, Caroline, you're not too far. Actually, you're the closest one so far, Caroline. 15k a night for the royal suite. It's not opened quite yet, but if you want to book it, that's what you'd expect to pay. Now, we've arrived at our final spot. There's not much to see today on Trafalgar Square because they're in the middle of setting up everything for Gay Pride tomorrow. So tomorrow, that's the London Pride, and that's one of the main stage. That's the free stage. I think you'll have some musicians down here. It is huge, the London Pride. It's so busy. You can't really come and see your friends because there's no signal, because it's so busy that you can never find your friends. I used to. Oh, Laurie, you're the closest. Yeah. It's I much prefer the Brighton Pride because you've got a bit of the seaside breeze and everything. The London one, it's a bit too much for me, really. But yeah, if you wanted to come to Pride tomorrow, that's gonna be the center of the action. Well, I think they start in Hyde Park Corner, but here on Soho and all central London, really, it's gonna be madness. Oh my chew, there's absolutely no chance of that. Even normal signal, you cannot send a text. How many times did I try to meet my friends and I never found them? You have to come with a friend. Otherwise, you can never get a signal to find your friends. And by the minute you manage to send a text, they've already moved. It's a nightmare because it gets so busy. Oh no, they've moved my bicycle is there, but they've just placed those barriers now, so I don't know how I'll get to my bicycle. I'll have to go on the road. That's fine. There's a gap here. Perfect. Right, thank you guys for coming tonight. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions before I abandon you. And of course up there, that's the Admiral Nelson, known for the Battle of Trafalgar. He is the one that died at Trafalgar, and of course at the time they didn't really have the capacity to preserve the bodies very well. They used to dump, whenever the Navy officers died at sea, they usually dumped their bodies at sea. But the Duke did not want his body to be dumped at sea. He wanted to be brought back to London. He had told his men. So allegedly, when he died, they didn't know how to preserve him, so they put him in a barrel of brandy that they had stolen from the French. When they arrived in London, the Admiral had been very well preserved. He was literally pickled, but there was no more brandy. It is said that the Navy officers had dug little holes to drink it anyway. We used to have an expression, no one really says it anymore, but tapping the Admiral, that's to go for a shot or to go for a drink. Anyway, thanks everyone. Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Tish. Thanks for all of you that dropped me a little tip as well. That's really, really appreciated. Thank you, Mitzi. If any of you dropped me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal, that's equally appreciated. I don't see them live in the chat, but make sure you know you're very, very much thanks. And if you want to see a bit more of me, next Thursday, I've scheduled a tour by Tower Bridge, so we'll go and see an opening of Tower Bridge, and we'll have a nice little live walk by the river. Quite late at night, it's just before 10 p.m. Because of the heat wave these days, I don't want to schedule anything at daytime, because you never know if it's 35 Celsius. That's too much for my phone. My phone cannot cope for an hour streaming in the heat. It usually overheats. You love the wig? What wig? And yeah, thank you for coming today. I'll see you in Tower Bridge. And if not, keep an eye on my channel, because I'll be posting a couple of videos in the next week or so. I still need to do oh, my hair. No, that's not a wig, that's my hair. Yeah. It's my grey hair that's finally almost, I've been letting it grow grey for over 6 months now, because I still had a bit of color, so it takes forever to grow, to be able to cut the dyed colored hair. You'll be there. Right, cool. Thank you guys. Thank you for coming tonight. Always a pleasure to have so many of you on board. If any of you were completely new to me, if you've made it that far into the video or into the live, you might want to consider subscribing. That's the best way not to miss the live, because otherwise you end up watching the replay. So you want to subscribe and hit the little notification bell. This way you don't miss any of the live streams. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Ronnie. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, I meant to say. And hopefully I'll see some of you next Thursday. Have a great evening or a great morning. A great Pride if you're fairly local. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Have a good one.